Hello and welcome to this table conversation of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast, the Chasing Clarity podcast, and my 100% Real with Ruby podcast. We are getting real here in a world that likes to make things either way too complicated or simplify things way too much. There's the good information and the bad information that confuse us. We are always going to be gravitated to what we fundamentally believe because we don't actually get fed on our newsfeed what is actually factual. We get fed what we fundamentally believe to be true because the more that we search up things, the more that gets fed to us. So we get really confused on what it is we need to see the results we want in our body composition. More muscle and less fat. Yet so many women are so focused on the fat loss side, on getting leaner. Then they get told, okay, well, we need to build muscle. We need to lift heavier. We need to eat a little bit more. We need to reverse diet. That's why we're not seeing results. In the mix of all of this, we are still focusing on all of the wrong things. And that is why we come to you trying to break it down in the best way that we can, trying to give you some proof of concept, which I sent 2 different photos to one of my clients showing them the difference between my lying leg curl with me focusing on what I should be focusing on versus me just doing a lying leg curl, which is squeeze your glutes to do the leg curl. And that keeps the tension on your hamstrings the whole time because squeezing your glutes gets your pelvis in the right position, thrusted into the hip pad, versus if you're just leg curling it because you're getting the weight from A to B and that isn't keeping tension there. It's just overall tension in the whole body. So are you actually stimulating the change you need? Are you actually training to form failure for that muscle to get enough stimulus? And the overall principle is if you put all of that obsession, all of that focus into the thing that changes your physique, that gives you the results that you want, which isn't another diet, you've exhausted that wagon before, has that got you to where you want to be? Because I'm pretty sure that has been the history of your life. We can repeat that, or we can do things differently and focus on what actually matters. So from there, what do we have to say about what it is that women are focusing on that is holding them back because they haven't yet been taught or truly accepted that this is what they need to focus on, whether it's out of fear of getting body fat, whether it's out of fear of sliding backwards, or just they don't understand just how much muscle the body they want requires and how much focusing on when is the next dieting phase, when is the next time I get to lean out, or I just want to reveal what's under here, or I'm getting so uncomfortable now because it's hot and sticky and I feel bleh. That doesn't serve you. Take it away.
All right. So I think that the broad-based theme of this podcast is going to be mistakes people are making that are limiting them from hitting their goal physique. And we'll really center this on women, the mistakes that we see as coaches in practice, and the mistakes that we see even our viewers, our listeners, and our followers making continually time and time over again. I think there's a really big disassociation between what someone needs to do to achieve their goal physique and where they are right now. And oftentimes individuals are being influenced by social media influencers or posts that they see, things that are really being put out into the ether for likes, clicks, and engagement that are telling them, listen, you need to get lean, or, this is the best protocol for fat loss. And oftentimes they're losing sight of the fact that many of the women that we work with are coming from a place that they do not have the prerequisite level of muscle mass to attain the lean muscular physique that they want. Because when we think about the physiques that many women come to us looking for, that they are dying for, it is not just a smaller, scrawnier version of themselves. It is a more muscular, more toned, a stronger version of themselves. And that takes setting a muscular foundation, which necessitates pushing yourself incredibly hard in the gym, learning how to train with intent and intensity, meaning in close proximity to failure and with correct technique, as well as sufficiently fueling yourself. So a lot of times we're seeing amalgamation of mistakes being made on all fronts. So from a training perspective, we're seeing that people are not pushing themselves hard enough. And that is due to multiple components. Not only is that due to not knowing how to truly train to failure or push themselves to their absolute limit, it also is coming from the fact that a lot of women are scared to push themselves. They've been fed these circuit training workouts or just chasing the burn rather than really going to a point where they're pushing their maximal progressive overload types of styles of training where they're really getting stronger, that they're lifting heavier weights. And then in conjunction with that, we're seeing a lot of nutritional mistakes where people are constantly in a deficit, chronically dieting themselves, even if they aren't thinking that it's as such. Many times, Ruby and Jeff, I've spoken with you guys both about these on your podcast. We have what I refer to as the weekday dieter, someone that chronically over restricts themselves Monday through Friday, and then they overeat on the weekends. So they get the worst of both worlds. This is essentially being in diet purgatory. You are not getting the fat loss results because you're not maintaining a net deficit across the week, but you're getting the hormonal and metabolic perturbations of low energy availability and metabolic adaptation. And at the same time, because the vast majority of the week you are under fueling yourself, you are not able to push yourself sufficiently hard enough to accrete and build lean muscle tissue during the week. So you have a low resting metabolic rate, you have shit low calories from a maintenance perspective, you have really poor biofeedback, your hormones are tanked, and your training performance is not progressing over time, which is the requirement from a mechanical tension and a progressive overload perspective needed to build a leaner, more muscular, more toned, and stronger physique. So I think we're having a situation where we're really missing the boat in multiple components. If we look at the other end of the spectrum, besides just training and nutrition, we have a lot of individuals that have chronically stressful lifestyles. So they're not having sufficient sleep. They're not getting adequate recovery. They're kind of burning the candle on both ends. And a lot of times this comes from a personality perspective. I know the women that I work with are type A individuals. I'll give you a perfect example. I'm currently working with the senior vice president of CVS, and she is an incredibly successful and driven woman. She's in her 50s. She's running a massive company. CVS is one of the biggest pharmacies in the US. However, she's traveling to and from across the country multiple times a week. And actually, it's very timely that we're having this conversation because we just had a conversation. We had done a primer phase, and she wanted to go right into a fat loss phase. And I said, Lara, I understand what your goals are, but you are not physiologically nor psychologically in a position to diet. We would have the best position I could put you in is to go into a muscle building phase first, make that our priority, and manage your stress and improve your digestive issues. And then we can earn the right to diet rather than doing the reverse where everyone just jumps into a deficit and hopes and prays that they're going to gain muscle and achieve the physique they want. Every time people do that, they end the same place at the end where they're a smaller, scrawnier version of themselves. They never attain the physique they want and they're frustrated and they think that the next solution to their problem is another diet. It's not. It's eating sufficiently. It's fueling yourself properly. It's pushing yourself hard in the gym and aiming for muscle growth.
Just quickly want to touch on one thing you said there, and that is mechanical tension to do that. People aren't getting enough mechanical tension. They're not pushing themselves enough. And you also mentioned that they don't want to push themselves or they're scared to push themselves. And I don't blame any of you here who are, because I see so many of you ending up with back niggles, knee niggles, pain, and just coming across way too many plateaus. And then because you're not seeing progress, you get bored or you flip the switch or you're confused about, are you actually on the right path? Is this actually working for you? And then you don't feel things in the right area. So then you go looking for something else. And the reason I don't blame you is because you don't get taught how to properly brace. The amount of women that I see that don't know how to control their hips, like when you go to brace, it's, am I meant to hold my breath? Am I meant to just breathe normally? Am I meant to suck my stomach in or push my stomach out? Bracing looks different with every exercise that you do. And if you're not engaging your lats and if your glutes aren't able to engage, which requires you to have your whole rib cage compressed, as in like you want to have sort of like a crunch. You're trying to crunch your abs, but it's not just that, you're bracing down. It's not bracing out, it's bracing down. But this needs to be taught, and it's not something that you just learn in a month. And that's where there's so much impatience. And if you're not going to take the time to learn these foundations, of course you're not going to be able to progressively overload over time. Of course you're not going to be able to build the muscle you want. Of course you're going to end up in the same cycle, even if you have all of what Brandon said in line, which that is the fundamental piece, because you are not able to focus on all of this stuff, on being able to feel like you're progressing and able to put up the weights the way that will make you feel like, hey, I'm getting something out of this. If you're chronically focusing on the wrong things, like the next diet, how about we take a whole step back, learn how to build the foundations for however long that takes, because then you will keep progressing. We can just keep tackling at things now, just hit the weights, lift things A to B. but we're gonna have to then pull things back at some point, and you're gonna wish you did that sooner because now what happened to all that time? You weren't really doing anything there because you weren't bracing properly. You were just cycling the same thing, which is why Jeff mentioned inputs, which is why I wanted to input with this. So then he can bring in, well, we need to focus on the right inputs. Because if your pelvis, when you go to brace, is it like sticking your bum out? Do you breathe into your chest and open up your chest? Are you doing Romanian deadlifts or squats with looking up into the mirror in front of you or just looking up in front of you? Are you pulling faces that make it look like you're straightening your face, which doesn't, well, yeah, you do that to try to hit effective reps, but are you bracing or are you just holding your face in this weird position, holding your breath? We need to nail the things that allow you to progressively overload, the things that allow you to hit effective max tension on the muscle. And we need to know the difference between when something is hurting and burning and really hard and when something is actually going to that muscle failure point. And if you don't have the things that Brandon mentioned in check, like your sleep, your food there, then there are other things that are going to make you hit some failure point, some fatigue point. But that is not the actual failure, fatigue, max tension that the muscle is receiving. These other factors have just impacted where that ceiling is, but the muscle is going to pretty much stay the same. Am I saying that there's no point lifting if you don't have these things in check? No, because they're still maintaining. And if you're not trying to improve or build muscle, you're losing it. Trying to build muscle is going to ensure that you at least maintain it. And then making sure everything else in check is going to help you build it. But it's fucking hard. There's some French there, but I'm sorry, but it's harder than losing fat. Losing fat is really easy if you take enough time away from it, because then you're not exhausted mentally and habitually from focusing on it all the time. Because I'm not saying no to, sometimes I go and have an extra nibble, or sometimes I'm just like, yeah, whatever. Like, I will not be able to have restraint on myself if I have exhausted that restraint, and the only proof I have is I always fail anyway. I don't trust myself. What's the whole point of trusting myself? Because I always get it back. These are really like you're going to keep sabotaging. So it's beneficial from all spectrums to stop focusing on this, to focus on the right things, because when you need to do it, then it's going to actually happen for you and you're going to see the results you want. Focus on the right inputs.
I think too, with building muscle, it's harder in the sense that it's just a slower process. And that, to come back to like what you said, people just, with fat loss like that, anytime you lose weight and you lose fat, like I feel like your changes are going to be a lot quicker. Right. And people kind of get used to that. And with building muscle, it's just such a slower process. And I think that's hard for people to kind of wrap their minds around. And so you almost kind of feel like you're not making progress. So, again, to come back to what you said, it's like people they need to see that they're progressing. And so I just think that that's the hardest part with building muscles. It just freaking takes time. And again, that's totally against what we, kind of are thrown from a social media standpoint with fitness, right? It's always like this quick transformation, but building muscle just freaking takes time. And again, fat loss is going to be the quickest way, I think, to see physique change. But as we've discussed already, like that may not be the best situation for every single person right then and there, right? And I always say with hypertrophy, the hard part because like when people hear train harder, I think they just think that they just need to like feel that they're working harder. And then you see like technique breakdown and maybe they're training harder and they're lifting heavier, but it's, we come back to the mechanical tension thing. It may not be, actually applying the right tension to the right muscles. The hard part with hypertrophy training, I think, at least, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, is you need to push yourself close to failure, but it's also like pushing through that point of discomfort, but then also maintaining good technique and staying focused during that time, right? I think that is the hard part of hypertrophy training. And I think that's where when people hear intensity, they maybe kind of mix those two things up. They think they just need to lift heavier, but it's also kind of pushing through those things, right? And, Brandon, I know you kind of mentioned, you work with someone that's a CEO of CVS, right? I think of the mental fatigue, right? Like, I think that's going to impact their ability to push close to failure, because they're, like that mental fatigue really does weigh on you, and it's hard to, push close to failure when you're in that state, right? So that's where kind of doing those things outside of the gym. But then I also think it's a skill based thing as well too, where you may not get there right away. It's going to take some time to be able to get to that point to where you're pushing close, you feel that discomfort, and you maintain your technique. So I also think that that takes time too. And that's a skill that takes time to develop on top of a process that already takes a while on top of it, right? So
100%. I think that we definitely need to acknowledge the fact that fat loss is much sexier and much quicker. However, really what I have found to be successful in practice with clientele is getting them to shift their mindset in terms of the value judgment that they place upon themselves, as well as the metric in which they look to assess progress. So instead of looking at what my body weighs or how lean my abs look, resting in the morning upon waking during a fat loss phase, when we shift to a lean building phase, or even to like a maintaining phase where they're trying to build muscle at maintenance, something that has been very advantageous, especially for my women to shift their mindset out of, is to stop thinking about their body in the context of what it weighs or what it looks like, and looking at what their body can actually do in the gym. And that is where we use the assessment of progressive overload, or progressive increases over time in performance, as an indication of progress. And Jeff, as you alluded to, really it comes down to multiple things. First and foremost, we need to make sure that their exercise selection is adequate, so that we are actually targeting the target musculature that they are looking to build. Because a lot of times people are utilizing, this is a perfect example. I have a lot of even women that have been influenced by some social media influencers about training heavy and going hard and going heavy, and they're lifting in the 3 to 5 rep range, and they're doing a bunch of deadlifts and compound movements. It's not that I'm disregarding the importance or benefit of these movements, but in the specific instance of a deadlift, not a Romanian, an actual deadlift, what does that train? When I have conversations with clientele, I'm like, what exact muscle does that train? Well, it trains everything. Well, by proxy, if it trains everything, it trains nothing specifically. And so really what it comes down to is shifting their exercise selection, their programming, giving them a progression scheme to shoot for, whether that be increases by reps or load, and then teaching them how to push themselves past where they've been before. Because we can simplify the hypertrophy process down to, yes, progressive overload and the importance of mechanical tension, which is just the force generated by muscle fibers in a movement. But what it really comes down to is acknowledging the fact that you need to take your body and a specific muscle that you are looking to grow further than it's been previously, from a performance perspective, from a load perspective. And as you mentioned, Jeff, you have to push yourself past discomfort. So what I found to be very advantageous is just looking at videos of clients. And another thing that I do extensively is I push, whether it be a woman or a male, to weeks of training to failure extensively. Meaning it's not 1 week of training to failure. It's not like this RP strength thing where, you go from 3 or 4 reps in reserve down to 0 reps and you stay there 1 week and then you deload. Like, that is not how I train. That's not how I program. I was recently having a conversation with a mutual friend of all of ours, Jeremiah, and it was on his podcast. And he mentioned on the podcast how he had never had someone that continually told him that he had more in the tank. And every single week it was validated that he did have more, because I was looking at his rep drop off, his decrease in velocity from his movements. And a lot of times I wasn't seeing such a substantial decrease from rep 1 to say rep 12 that would indicate that he was actually to failure. So that is a big thing. If you guys want something a little less abstract from like the bracing and the biomechanics perspective, or even like technique that would be more difficult for us to express on a podcast and you guys to really envision this, just look at your rep speed. We want your technique to look similar from rep 1 to say you're doing a 10 rep set, and rep 10 should be failure. From rep 1 to 10, you should have similar technique, meaning the actual execution of the movement should look similar, but your rep speed, meaning aka movement velocity, should be substantially different. There should be a noticeable drop off in your rep speed that is noticeable on a video. Don't do it subjectively by, I think I slowed down. Actually videotape yourself and see, are my reps really significantly slowing? Like, for me personally, I've been training 21 years at this point. I see a significant decrease in rep speed where I'm literally grinding almost to a halt when I'm hitting 0 reps in reserve or I'm at failure. And I'm making sure that I'm not breaking form. It's going to look a little bit different. And you have to be able to assess whether you are using body, mechanics or body motion, and you're breaking form to a significant enough degree that it's going to cause harm, or it's not going to hit that target musculature. There are people that utilize body English, or they have a different types of movement mechanics at the end of their set, and they're still hitting the target musculature. So that is an assessment you have to make between yourself and your coach, but there should be a substantial drop in movement velocity, meaning your rep speed should slow down substantially to know that you're getting to failure. Because I can't tell you how many times that I've done a technique check in terms of a video analysis for a client, and they told me, it's a 0 rep in reserve week. I know this, I have it programmed in their sheets, and they tell me, yeah, I hit failure. And the movement velocity didn't slow down barely at all. And then what I have them do often, one of two methods that I utilize with clientele to have them really get a better gauge of what failure is, which is a moving target over time. You will have to re-gauge your actual proximity to failure time and time again. Training is a skill, just like Jeff, you were alluding to. Two methods that I utilize are either on a spin bike, I have them do hit sprints to the point where they can't push anymore, so they actually know how hard they can push themselves, or I will take a movement that they've sent me a video of. And it's clear from my assessment that they are not at 0 reps in reserve, but psychologically or mentally, they think they are. So what I have them do is either the next day or on their next off training day, I just have them go to the gym and just do one set of that movement, AMRAP. So as many reps as possible. And I can't tell you how many times people have been 3, 4. I have one woman I always think of in the back of my head. She said this was like a game changer for her. She was a coach herself. She had personally trained people in the gym, but she had never taken a hack squat truly to failure. Now, I'm not saying to go to the point where you hurt yourself, but I told her to get pinned. And she had 6 more reps as compared to what she said she had when she was at a 0 reps in reserve week. So there's a massive discrepancy between our subjective assessments of how hard we're training and the objectiveness of actually training to true muscular failure. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that every movement or every set or every workout, but you need to know, you need to take yourself to the sun to see how hot it is, to be able to re-gauge and really recalibrate your actual accurate assessment of your proximity to failure. Whether you're training 1 rep in reserve, 2 reps in reserve, it doesn't matter. If you don't know what 0 reps and what your true failure is, you're going to be inaccurate when you're utilizing a reps in reserve types of training methodology.
Yeah, but this is also why learning how to brace, lock yourself in is so important, because even on the leg press, even on the leg extension, you could be thinking that you're going to true failure, but are you locking yourself in? There was a girl in the gym and she wanted to target her quads. So I'm like, well, I want to be able to do the leg press like the beat. Do it more quad focused, and why not just get her to do it with me? So I brought her in to do the leg press with me, and she just flops little fairy hands on the handles and then tries to push herself. And it's like she's putting in effort. I'm like, dude, why are you such a princess with the handles? Like, pull yourself in. Like, crunch that thing. I should be seeing tension in your whole upper body. And you can pull your back easily by letting yourself do all this weird stuff with your arms, or it feels really fatiguing and hard. But you haven't locked yourself in and truly pushed yourself. And then there was a particular time I did 2 different sets. The first one, because I was in my own head, I'm a human. I get in my head massively when I put the gym off and I end up going in after 4 p.m. I cannot perform mentally after 4 p.m. If that happens, then I get in my own head. But then I'm just like, no, get out of it, Ruby. And it took me a while on my 3rd set. I'm like, come on, I got this. Like, I try to pump myself up, and my goodness, the strength I had on that 3rd set was astronomically greater than the first one. Yet I still took that first one to my failure point. So are you actually giving yourself the right amount? You don't want to go too much and you don't want too little. Are you giving yourself enough arousal before the set? It even sounded like it. But there you go. Are you giving yourself enough arousal before the set? Are you truly setting yourself up to get the most out of that set? I don't think many women do. And back to what I was saying on the bracing, you're not going to be able to be told by your coach to keep increasing the weight, to keep progressing, to do what Brandon said safely, and to the muscles advantage of growth if your form's wrong, if your technique's wrong, because you keep skipping the process, because everything that Jeff said on point, it's boring. You need patience. It's the same repetition over and over again. You need to learn the skill, and that shit is boring. You're going to want to hurry up and just do something where you see instant progress. But when you mentioned that the hardest part of hypertrophy training, I think it's more so, am I really going to pay money for this? Am I really going to invest into this when I feel like everything is just the same every single week? That's kind of the point. The coach's job is to stop you doing dumb shit, just to put it bluntly. But the dumb shit isn't your fault. It's because that's what we've been fed. And we see these before and after photos on social media, and then all of a sudden we're comparing our worst, I feel like I'm not progressing, to, oh my God, you have this huge contrast, and then you want to just pull the plug straight away. Or you're so used to seeing the fast progress because that's been your whole history that you don't know the difference. And it just feels like, well, there's no point. I'm going to change coaches now. I'm going to change programs now. Hey, I want to just not do this anymore because it just feels like a waste of money to you. But no, it's the best investment because it's the way. You're not paying to be entertained with feedback every week. You're paying for the end result. You're paying just not think about this shit. You're paying for someone to keep you on the right path and get you a different result for the first time in your life, which means doing things differently. So we need to build this foundation so that you can see the results you want. Because I put up a video of my stiff leg deadlifts and my belly felt like a freaking elephant, like huge, and I couldn't put a belt on. So you could full see that there's some round, well, not really rounding, but you could see that my back wasn't textbook form straight. And even when I have a belt, it looks that way. But I thought it was the perfect example because I didn't have a belt on, yet you could see my lats because I'm lean enough where you could see my lat lines from my armpits all the way down to my pelvis. You could see how engaged my lats were through every single rep on my stiff leg deadlift. I think I was doing whatever 115 times 2.2. I was doing 253 pounds, 115 kilos on my stiff leg deadlift. And you could see on the last two reps, there's slight little like rounding, but the whole engagement is there. I never have back pain. I never have any issues with my back when I do really heavy weights and there's some rounding in my back. Why? I actually feel it in my glutes and my hamstrings, sometimes my adductors, because I did the work before then. And what I mentioned in that post is it is not that you need another fat loss thing. It's that you need to learn how to brace. You are under muscled. And the reason that your back keeps giving out and the reason that you would probably jump on someone's back like my one is because your history is, oh my God, that only blew my back before. Well, no wonder, because you need to put in the work there. But then you also mentioned focusing on the right things. I like to encourage gym selfies more than the passport week-to-week photos because the gym selfies are encouraging, hey, let's actually take some nice lighting photos and encourage ourselves, focus on the positives because we are so used to picking ourselves apart in our week-to-week photos anyway. Oh my God. I look like a freaking I can pull myself apart to the nth degree if I was to scrutinize my photos because I don't have a waist. It doesn't look very appealing, but when I pose, when I'm moving about like a normal human person in day-to-day life, it's not really a problem. And I'm actually, doing things that other people would see me as. And I'm focusing on the things that actually change my body, which there we go, the gym selfies. But my favorite form check videos and comparing them over time, even better, taking screenshots of your form check videos. But then you do need to be continuously, this is what you're paying a coach for as well, continuously be rerouted, continuously be forced to refocus on what matters because it's easy to pull yourself apart. Oh, I look like I'm pregnant in this video. Or I look like, well, no shit. You're not in the gym to look like a pageant. You're in the gym to brace, to make reps start to look ugly. Start to look ugly is the key, not actually look ugly, because you're not going to have perfect form on that last set, last rep. And that's okay if you mentioned this as well, Brandon, because sometimes there might be a little bit of body English, but are you actually engaging the muscle? Is it still full range of motion? If there is a little bit, then there you go. There's your sign that there's either maybe half left of a rep or one left of a rep, and then you need to cut it because there's your form failure. And that only can happen if you have the basis, if you have the foundations there, because otherwise you're not going to be able to load it to that degree without getting back to the beginning of ouch. And warm-ups.
Yeah, so a few things there. I do want to acknowledge the fact that there may be certain clientele, and I obviously attract a different type of clientele. So people are looking to me for both aesthetics and then also health, remission, essentially, the improvement of certain health markers or health conditions that they're dealing with. But I find it to be very advantageous during a building phase or focus period that we are focusing on muscle growth, that we're not just focusing on the aesthetic ideals, what you look like. It's also what you feel like, improving biofeedback, improving things like your lab markers. I'm very big on doing comprehensive lab work with clientele. And some of the best periods of time in which I'm able to rectify markers, whether that's LDL and HDL cholesterol, whether that is their thyroid levels, whether that is a woman's cycle from a menstrual cycle regularity perspective, are during a building phase when I'm sufficiently fueling them. I'm making sure that they're getting adequate micronutrient intake. There's so many extensive and additional benefits to being in a building phase, fueling yourself properly, training hard in the gym, not only from a training perspective, but also from a lifestyle perspective. I always say this, that I'm really looking to, especially with the women that I work with, shift them from a mindset of restriction and subtraction to a mindset of abundance and addition, to get them out of this restricted mindset where they constantly feel like they need to be cutting calories or getting smaller or seeing their scale weight go down. And so it could be both a physiologically and a psychologically liberating process for someone. It could really allow you to create a foundation from a muscularity perspective, but also from a mental resilience perspective. You learn how hard you can push yourself. So that's one component. When people, I don't really get these arguments back and forth that coaching is a waste of money, or, during a building phase, they don't need to do so. I really do try to empower with education, really give my clientele, before we go into any phase, a lot of education about why we're doing this, what the goals and the objectives and the targets are for this phase. Then the other component, Ruby, that you hit on was essentially utilizing gym selfies. I do something very similar. It's post-workout photos. So I do both fasted photos in their check-ins as well as post-workout photos. And that's for a multitude of reasons. First and foremost, I want to see what someone looks like in a non-fasted state. So I want meals in their system. I want sodium, I want water, fluid, electrolytes in their system to see what they look like when they actually get a pump and when they actually have some life to them. Because I will tell you personally, I'm someone that if you see me fast in the morning, I'm lean, but I look like I don't fucking lift. I need to get a pump. I need to get into the gym. And then I basically transform. And I've noticed that with many different clientele. And oftentimes people do pick apart their fasted photos, because let's think about this realistically. When people come to us for coaching, whether they're a brand new client or they're someone that has worked with multiple coaches, the only time in their life that they've ever taken a selfie immediately upon waking in a fasted state after going to the bathroom is during the coaching process. So it is a period, or it is a type of photo that they're not used to seeing themselves in that light or in those type of conditions. And so I find it very advantageous to show someone, listen, this is what you look like upon waking, and then this is what you look like after the gym. I try to get across the fact that yes, the pump isn't the best indicator of muscle growth by any means. It is a good indicator of, are you hitting the actual target muscle that we are looking to bias during that training session? But also something I really try to get across to clientele, and it's been very helpful to describe it or analogize it in this fashion, is I want you to look at what you look like at the gym or after your training session. That is the person that you can grow into and actually look like in the future. Because really, when you think about it, the pump is an increase in vasodilation, an increase in blood flow, and nutrient delivery to the muscles that you're training. So you look basically inflated. It's training induced edema. So it's an inflammatory response that we get from effective muscle growth training. But essentially, your structure is your structure. You're not going to look any different from a structure perspective for the most part, unless you go through extreme types of, there are some GI protocols we could utilize to get your waist down and other things. However, what you look like in the gym is what you could hope to aspire to looking like in the future if you stay consistent. Because essentially what you're seeing in the gym is a bigger, more muscular looking version of yourself, more vascular, a little bit leaner, because you've essentially excreted some fluids, you've sweat, you've excreted through sweat. And so your pumped look is essentially a look into the future. It's forecasting what you could look like in a few more months of consistency.
I like that last part. It's a look into the future. Exactly. We need to start focusing on what that future is going to look like. Inputs. I do think that this goes back to the inputs, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I mean, real quick, I think you guys make great points across the board there. I like the post-workout selfie because, you definitely see that where you take those not random pictures, but you take the ones where it's the before and afters, and it's like, yeah, you usually are doing those like at the beginning of the day, and you just don't and it's just, I feel like it's really hard to see muscle growth in those pictures, right? So you need to flex, whatnot. And so I like that. I think that's great. But to go back to Brandon's point too about the building, being more than, just aesthetics. I think that's a great point. And I think finding ways to point out other wins throughout. So like Brandon said there, is it going to be, looking at biofeedback? Is it going to be blood markers? Is it, for women, is it going to be the menstrual cycle? And to come back to what we've talked about throughout this conversation too, is, performance related goals as well too. So I think building phases can be more than just building muscle. And I think if that's the only focus that we have on, what our scale weight is and building muscle, I could see where that phase can be tough to stick with when we know that really is going to be the phase that builds things moving forward, right? I think I like to describe the building phase as building muscle is going to be part of it. I think, again, if we have our inputs right, like that's going to be a byproduct of what we're doing, but we're building more than just building muscle, right? Like we're building habits, we're building I know maybe some people don't necessarily agree with this phrasing, but building our metabolism, right? I mean, if you're someone who's always been chronically dieting, this can be a phase where you can, build your metabolism, right? You're building, I may have said this already, but building habits, building performance. So there's other things that we're building that are going to help you later on down the line. So I like to think of a building phase from that perspective versus just muscle focus there. But yeah, I think too with the inputs, what we've talked about. I mean, just to go over a few things from a training perspective that I see kind of, because I didn't get to say what I thought on a few of those things. So I want to say this, but like, I do think that, I don't know if you guys see this, but I feel like when you give somebody a training program, one of the mistakes that they'll make, and this keeps them from being able to push close to failure, is they sort of just kind of rush through the set. I don't know if you guys see this, where it's like, and I think I wanted to bring this up too, because you talked about bracing, and, I think the setup's important. And if you just kind of go in and just do the set just to kind of check the boxes off in terms of hitting your reps, hey, this is what I did last week, I just need to do one more rep, I do feel like you do kind of miss out on the importance of, hypertrophy training. And so, like you said, setting up Ruby, I think is important, making sure that's there. But then I see this a lot where people just sort of rush through their set to just kind of get it done, right? And I think that comes back to what I said about like pushing through that discomfort, right? Like that's the most important part. And I think people just kind of rush through it to get through. I know I've done that at times as well too. I'm just like, all right, this is what I need to hit, I'm going to do it. And you just try to get there as soon as possible. But I do feel like you miss out on some things and you kind of rush through. And then the last thing I want to say is, there really is no magic to any sort of like rep range or anything, right? Like that, right? I don't know if you guys see this, but when it comes to programming, say, 8 to 12 reps or 10 reps or whatever it is, like people think there's a magic to that rep. And I constantly have to be like, hey, that's just a way to help us gauge what weight we need to use, but we can go over that rep range if we need to help us, push further. No magic to rep ranges. You can go over or you can go slightly under, as long as, we're pushing close to failure there with that. So just a few thoughts I had on some of those things. I hope that answers your question, Ruby, on inputs, but that's kind of my thought there on that.
Yeah, I find it so rewarding as well to start realizing what it feels like to fully engage a muscle for the first time ever. It's like, oh my goodness, I can actually start chasing this. Oh, this feels so good. And like you were saying about the pump, it's like, I feel that burn in my lateral delt. And you start to kind of fall in love with the way your body feels in training as well. And I forgot to add on, I think the hardest part of hypertrophy training is being okay and accepting the fact that you're not going to see reps go up on all of your exercises every week. Sometimes you may not see any progress in a session because meeting, I think you work with Steve Hall, but meeting maybe no, you didn't, but he also says meeting the logbook in itself is a form of progressive overload, because it can be really hard for you to just meet that logbook, making things feel better, feel easier over time. And I'll use my shoulder press as an example. It took me, I was progressing so quickly. I went from like 10 kilos to, this is on the machine, I went from 10 on each side to 12 on each side to the 13, because I just put the little 1.2 on, and then the next one after that. And I just went really quickly until I hit about 16-ish. Then it was a slog to get to like 18, then a slog to get to, I added the little fraction. Actually, no, it was then a slog to get to 17.5. And then actually it didn't take all that long to get to 18, but then I was stuck there for a while. So, I kept myself stuck there for a while because I just wanted to really focus on really slowing it down, getting it engaged. And then I'm like, I'm going to try 20 on the last set. Did it. And then this week I did 20 on all of them. Sometimes it's going to be a really, really long process. And then if it's like lateral raises, then just get okay with the fact that you're probably going to lift 10 pounds your whole life, or even less. Like when you're starting out, it's probably going to need to be less so you learn how to do it. But that's the hardest part of hypertrophy training, being okay with not always chasing things up and knowing which exercises are what, because a lying leg curl is not one that you want to push as an example, because the leverages are just all wrong. It's like a lateral raise, like the pivot and the fulcrum, the lever arm, like it's just everywhere. And then the back gets taxed, and then you start pushing something. I remember when my pull-ups got less over time because I started to ego lift my lat pull downs and not get the full motion like this, not have my lats engaged the whole time, because I don't know, I got in my own head and started to just want to add on like a 2.5 because my lat pull downs were stuck for weeks and weeks and weeks. And that's another thing. Cable exercises may be like that too, because you can easily add the weight, but is it the target muscle that's getting that added load? Probably not. And then it impacts other lifts.
Well, that's funny you bring up like I like that you brought up the progressions, right? Because like you said, you're not going to be able to progress every single time either. I do see that as a big mistake there. And I think what ends up happening is, yeah, you're progressing in the logbook sense, but like you said, now we're not necessarily hitting the target muscle. So that definitely is a mistake. But I do feel like that's the biggest complaint I get is like, oh, I'm not getting stronger. I'm like, what, what's going on? Oh, my lateral raises haven't gone up. I'm like, okay, that's literally like the one exercise that's going to take freaking forever, right? It's like, let's look at your like leg press. Let's look at your hack squat. And then like, that's the one that people are like not progressing as much. And I think it does come down to like, let's be honest, what is tougher? Is it going to be a leg press, hack squat, or is it going to be a lateral raise, right? So like, I don't know if that's something you guys see, but I do see that a lot too, where like people get caught up in some of those smaller muscle group exercises and they're like, this is not going up. I'm not getting stronger. But then you look at like leg press and hack squat and they're kind of sandbagging that one there.
Yeah, I think a few things we need to touch on is that there's a very big misconception and misinterpretation of what progressive overload actually is. Many people have the misconception that progressive overload means that each and every single time you step in the gym to do that session, you are going to progress in either load or into reps. And what we really need to acknowledge and realize is that progressive overload is a physiological stressor on the target tissue, meaning it's a continuum. We can analogize this to maintenance calories. A lot of people will say, oh, my maintenance is 2000. No, it's probably 1900 to 2100. It's a range. And so once you've hit an adaptive stimulus point within your training program, you may need to hit that multiple times over to actually express that performance. Because progressive overload, a lot of people have the cart before the horse. They think, I need to progressive overload. No, the training you've done previously allows you to progressive overload. Progressive overload is that performance improvement is actually an adaptation of what you've done previously. You do not get bigger and stronger from progressively overloading. You are able to express better force production, as well as you are able to lift heavier or for more loads based on the adaptations that have already set, the morphological and neurological adaptations that have set forth from your previous performances, your previous training sessions. So there's many times that you were not going to progress in the gym. What I always try to tell clientele, and this will really range or will differ based on their level of advancement. So what we have to realize is when you're a newbie, you just get into the gym, our trajectory of our training career actually almost goes backwards. So when you first start, you're a rank newbie, you're making neurological adaptations. So it's from the neurons to the synapses in the spinal cord. You're essentially just getting technical proficiency. So every week you're adding loads or adding reps. And your progression is very quick. You're seeing things go up week after week after week, which is great from a dopamine perspective, a habits building perspective. It kind of gets you, essentially get bit by the iron bug. As you get deeper into your training career, intermediates, you might progress every 2 to 4 weeks. And then when you get advanced, I've been training 20 plus years. I'm lucky if once a mesocycle, I see a PR or I see a performance improvement. So that's really where it comes down to realizing that you're going to need to be in this adaptive threshold to push yourself to the point that you're capable of, making sure that you're actually standardizing things from a technique perspective, from a loading perspective, even from like a machine setup perspective, like how you're actually, like Ruby has been alluding to, bracing within a machine or bracing within an exercise. So there needs to be a conglomeration of things. You should be progressing. I always tell my clients, go into the session with a mindset of progression. I don't want you to think I'm going to lose reps or I'm not going to be able to hit a PR. I want you to go with a positive mindset and actually challenge yourself. But if you do not get that progression, do not be discouraged or disgruntled if you match last week's performance. Another thing, when we talk about progressive overload within certain movements, especially like a lateral raise or a cable lateral raise, especially isolation movements that are cable biased, we have to realize that gyms are made for the average person. They're not made for women in particular. So I always try to get across to my women that a lot of times I want them shooting in specific exercises, especially cable setups or dumbbell like laterals, bicep curls, essentially isolation movements. I really want them to shoot for rep progressions over load progressions. Because if we really think about it, say a woman is doing 15 pounds of a lateral raise. The next increment up is 20 pounds. That's a 33% increase. Whereas I'm doing 40 pounds on a lateral raise. If I go to 45, that's 1/8. So that's like 16% increase. So we're looking at a massive difference between loading progressions for a male as compared to a female. So I really like utilizing, essentially getting into a little bit higher rep ranges or really pushing reps so that they're still hitting that adequate proximity to failure, but they're not going into a loading range where it would be insufficient. Because many times I'll have a woman, she hits the upper end of, say, our target rep range is 10 to 15. She may hit a 15-pound lateral raise for 15 reps. And she says, well, I tried to go to 10 and now I get 5. Like that's a massive drop off. So really there is no like governor where you have to stop at 15 reps. Your target rep ranges are just that. It's a target, but really what we're looking for is to give you a parameter, like Jeff, you had said, for what your load should be. So as the rep range goes up, your loading parameter is going to go down. And when loads are up, your rep range is going to go down. And there is no fixed value. Between 4 and 30 reps, we see equivalent hypertrophy outcomes. So if you started a movement and you started with sets of 10, you could progress that all the way up to sets of 30. Now, is that the most efficient for, say, something like a leg press or a squat? No, but something like an isolation movement, like a lateral raise, you can more than do that and still sufficiently target and stimulate that muscle for growth.
I agree. I'm going to say this last thing real quick, and then I'm going to have to hop off here. So couple things, like you said, Brandon, I know myself from a training perspective, I've gotten caught up in that too, where I'm like trying to beat the logbook week over week. And I've definitely seen that go too far to where then like now I have to like, now I'm starting to get some joint pains and then, you kind of start to spin your wheels almost, even though you're progressing in a logbook sense. Right. However, I will say, and I'm sure you would agree with this too, Brandon, like some people you do need to have that logbook to try and beat, right. As well too, because some people are going to sandbagging. So I think it depends, but you can definitely take it too far to where it's like, hey, you don't have to progress every single week either. Like it's okay to match and sometimes even maybe let your reps go down a little bit, because I do think there's a lot of things that can impact our performance acutely. The big thing is we're looking at long-term trends. Where are things going at over time, right? Same thing with scale weight. It's like, when a fat loss phase, if you're seeing things trend down every single time you go in, that's probably a good thing, but there also that may not be the greatest thing either. And it's what that trend is over time. That's the most important there. But again, I think for some people, like it is needed to do that, to beat the logbook there. But sorry guys, I need to run. I appreciate, this was awesome to chat with you guys. But I'm going to have to hop off now. So thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for being here, brother. We'll talk soon.
Yeah, what you said on the rep range as well. It's when I always look at the end rep range of what I gave them. And if they're always hitting that end rep range and it's been like that for a little bit, it's like, well, why don't you take it above the rep range? See what you can actually do. And this actually leads to a question I got, which I think is actually better to address here because it's so much easier to talk about it and elaborate on it when you're speaking it. And because I was telling her to increase on the last set or the second set even, because then you accommodate to, well, not really accommodate, but you like warm up to that weight so you feel confident with the weight for the first set. And then on the second set, push yourself and then see what you can do on the third set. If it didn't feel as challenging on the second set, maybe increase the weight. And if the reps go below the rep range, whoop-de-doo, just try that rep range, try that weight next week when you didn't fatigue yourself on the second one, which kind of answers the question that she asked, which is, well, wouldn't you want to push yourself on the first set when you're really fresh versus on the last set? I'm like, well, no, not for hypertrophy. Like doing that for strength gains, I love that approach where you like max out on the first one because you're more fresh and then pull it back, yeah. But that's with the pulling back, not like straight sets. But also, you're not going to get as much volume out of it as much in the hypertrophy direction if you completely fatigue yourself on the first set at total balls to the wall, which I will still say push them close to form failure on all the sets. But if you're going to really, really, really push that first set and then pull it back on the rest, that is amazing for pushing for strength, which strength is needed for hypertrophy because a strong muscle is a lean muscle. A lean muscle is a strong muscle. The more strength you have, the more potential you have to build the muscle. The more muscle you have, the more potential you have for strength. It kind of feeds into each other. So it depends. When it comes to hypertrophy, it's not a black and white answer. When it comes to strength, then there is only really the one answer, and that is do it on the first set when you're neurologically fresh. And then do the backup sets. But when it comes to hypertrophy, there's many ways to skin the cat. The first approach works. The second approach works just as well. It's just, what is the focus for this little period here? And I would say doing it on the last set is a great way to just like push yourself for that very last little bit. And you know that, hey, I don't have another set afterwards, so I can truly just send it. If I die, if you don't die, I should say, if you don't die, it's fine. You didn't die. You know what I'm Okay, yeah.
No, yeah.
Oh, wait, there's one more thing. There's one more thing. If you're watching the video of this, because I'm going to have the video clip, I think one thing that will take, I know one thing. I know one thing that will take your training to the next level is to learn how to just connect to your muscles outside of the gym. Like, for example, if you're seeing this, you can see that I'm just flexing my pec muscle and I'm not lifting anything. Like, I can flex that pec and I can flex my delt. Like, you can see my delt just engaging like that. And if you can learn how to do that with your exercises and know what you need to feel, like, are you feeling your lat engage? This is where I think bodybuilding posing can be really beneficial because you learn how to engage your lats, whereas so many people do not know what it feels like to have their lats engage, which is why so many women struggle to build muscle because your lats are a fundamental piece of your bracing. If you're not engaging your lats in your RDLs, in your movement patterns, you're not really bracing properly because those lats are what keep everything nice and tight. So yeah, go on. I just wanted to add that part on because I think that's really important.
Yeah, so I take two different approaches to actually, whether it be cueing or programming for clientele. If I have someone that is either time poor or they are someone that is a better responder to lower volume training, I will actually utilize a lower rep range first with an exercise, so with a heavier load, and then that will essentially serve. So I'm going to give you a perfect example. It might be a leg press, and I might say you're going to do a set from 5 to 8 reps with a heavier load, and then we're going to do a back off set. So we have a top set, and a back off set. So you get neurologically primed with the heavier load for the lower reps, and you are able to benefit from what's called post-activation potentiation, which a lot of people use in strength and essentially power training. And so you're able to go in there, you feel a heavier load, you know you're capable of it, and then you pull back and say, a lot of times the rep range undulation I will utilize is say 5 to 8 reps for top set and then 10 to 15 reps for a back off set. Both are going to be in close proximity to failure. And if that week is 0 reps in reserve, take it to the fucking house. The other approach, as you were mentioning, Ruby, is to leave a little bit. So maybe we're doing 3 or 4 sets for a specific exercise and keeping the first couple sets at 1 rep in reserve. Really what we're trying to do is preserve volume load across sets, because a lot of times what happens, and this is what you were trying to express, is that someone shoots their load the first set. They go all the way to failure on set 1, but they have 3 more others. And then they're so fatigued because they're not able to dissipate that fatigue from that set, that now their performance, we see a massive drop off in what's called work capacity, or it's actually colloquially called the work capacity. But if you look at it in the research, it's actually called the fatigue index, which means you'll see certain people do this in the gym. Say their first set was 12 reps, their next set is 6 reps, then it's 3 reps, and then it's like 1 rep. You're not getting a sufficient dose from a hypertrophy perspective across all 4 sets. Whereas if you had kept 1 rep in reserve, say that you did 10, 10, 10, and then 12. If you look at the reps across those 4 sets, you're doing a massive increase as compared to if you did 12 sets at the beginning. And so that could almost work in a fashion where you're not only warming up, but you're priming for each consecutive set. You're maintaining a sufficient tension stimulus, but you're not fatiguing yourself to the point of pure exhaustion where you can't push yourself. So there's multiple avenues that we could approach. The other thing is that you were mentioning is you should be able to contract a muscle. And I'm going to give you guys a very common example I discuss with clientele. A lot of times I notice that individuals have lagging backs or lats, as you were alluding to, but it would be the actual entire lat or entire back. We're talking about the latissimus dorsi. We're talking about rhomboids, teres, upper back. Another area that a lot of people lag with are glutes and hamstrings. And often that's due to multiple components. A, you can't see those muscles. They're postural muscles. So you're not looking at them in a mirror, but oftentimes those are the muscles that many people have a poor mind to muscle connection with. And so what you're alluding to with posing is something that I often have many individuals do, where I will have them pose either before or after a training session to get a full contractile stimulus without actual load. And what's really interesting about that, there is a study, I believe it's from 2017 from Jeremy Lenecke's lab, where they actually looked at the hypertrophic effect of posing without load. So they had a resistance training intervention, and then they did another one where they literally posed and went through essentially like bicep curl exercises without load, but it was just fully contracting the bicep. And they actually saw in untrained individuals that they gained muscle. Now, am I telling someone that's trained that you're going to gain muscle from just flexing? No, I'm not. But you will get a much better mind to muscle connection. Another thing that I learned, I competed 15 times over the years. I remember I went in 2014 to a Kai Green seminar. Kai Green was very big into the mind muscle connection and actually posing, doing certain specific exercises that mimics his posing. So I'm going to give you the perfect example. He used to do behind the back lat pull downs because he was trying to mimic a rear double bicep pose. And I remember doing that when I was preparing for whether it be competitions or photo shoots. And that was something that was very advantageous. So sometimes it is to your benefit to play around with the gym, or even outside the gym, flex your hamstring, flex your calf, try to pose from the feet up. A lot of people, they know how to pose their upper body. They don't know how to pose their lower body for shit. So these are things that you could utilize just to get a better mind to muscle connection that you will be able to then transfer into your performance and your ability to target and bias a specific muscle in the gym.
Yeah. And you mentioned Kai Green. I actually learned from Ben Pakulski. I used to watch his videos back before my ADHD fled. I used to be able to sit through a YouTube video. Wow. But I used to watch his YouTube videos, and he's the one that taught me all about starting with engaging the muscle and then actually doing the movement itself. So many people, like we already spoke about in the podcast, they just grab the bar. And another huge mistake, because I'm using the lat pull down as an example for this one, you see someone's form, or you get a video from your coach saying this is how you do it, or you post your video into a Facebook group or wherever and you get form feedback. That is not going to help you if it is not tailored to your body and your body mechanics. And at the same time, you're still focusing on the wrong things because you're not trying to make your lift look like that lift. You need to know what it is as the principles that make it look like that. What are they focusing on? They're focusing on, okay, well, with the lat pull down, it's shoulder blades down. Like if you can't get your arms to come down and the bar to come lower without bending your arms, without pulling at the bar, then you don't know how to do a lat pull down. You won't ever be able to do a pull-up in your life because you need scapular strength. You need your scapulars to start it. And I like to teach clients to do scapular pull-ups to learn that movement, or a scapular pull down. So you do that movement and then you follow it through. So what is it you need to focus on for a lat pull down, instead of just, oh, I need to try to make the bar go from here to here. And okay, cool, now you're going to get a shoulder impingement or some form of pain because you're rounding your shoulders over. And I see this so commonly with every press movement there is and every row movement there is, because with the pressing, no one knows how to get their shoulder blades back and down so that they can continuously, it's not just about bracing now. This is about being able to load things to the nth degree and get crappy, well, not crappy form, but like a little bit deviant of form on the last rep, maybe two, without injuring yourself. Because on presses, what do people do? They have their shoulders rounded over and they're pressing like this. You're not getting the actual muscle. Even with shoulder presses, your shoulders are up at like your ears instead of just down, and getting your elbows in like a 30-degree scapular plane range of motion. But if you're rounding your shoulders over, that is putting all the strain on the shoulder tendons. And the same happens with rows. You're rowing or pulling and letting the shoulder come forward when you don't know how to use a shoulder blade and actually pull with the shoulder blade to target the muscles that need to be targeted. So you're getting in a row. What do we want to do? We want to fully stretch forward. And then you want to, if you're watching this on live, or not live, but if you're watching the video, you'll be able to practice this yourself. You want to think, stretch everything out completely. Let your shoulder blades move. I think the worst myth that we got brought up with is we need to pin the shoulders back whenever we do back movements. I don't know if you got told that when you started, but
I did, but then you got to really go into like Bill Hartman stuff about the compression and the expansion model. That's a very nuanced conversation in terms of like biomechanics and looking at the person's actual muscle architecture, and then their personal biomechanics, and then their actual anthropometrics. So like for some people, yes, pinching your shoulders may work and be advantageous. For others, letting the shoulder blades rest naturally is actually more advantageous. So it really matters, because I've worked with people from so many different backgrounds, from like strongmen to IFBB professional pros that have been on the Olympia stage to moms and dads. So I think that you really need to look at someone's anthropometric profile. What I really try to do.
I just want to quickly touch on that shoulder part, because you raised a really important point, just so you can move on. A lot of us sit at desks, so we may actually be forced into this posture where we can't actually move our shoulders, which is what you're talking about. And this is where I say, this is where you need to get a coach, because you should not be forced, you should not be doing shoulder presses with a barbell to start with. You shouldn't be doing bench presses with a barbell to start with. Exercise selection, going to Brandon's point of being the most important thing right now. You need to have a coach to pick the right exercises for you, because otherwise you're just going to keep ending up in agony. You shouldn't, even with dumbbells, you shouldn't be doing the the shoulder press on a 90-degree bench. You shouldn't be doing a lat pull down.
I say not only exercise selection, but also your actual setup. So I give a lot of cues within my programming. So for instance, for many people with shoulder issues,
I want you to take this. I want you to take this. So I just wanted to put a full stop so I can shut the hell up. But even with the lat pull down, I don't want you sitting all the way up. Get into the right range of motion, because you just mentioned this. That's why I want you to take it. Get into somewhere where you can get the muscles engaged, which if you never learnt to focus on this stuff, that is why you're not seeing the changes that you want, because you haven't been programmed, you haven't been taught how to change your body. You've only been taught how to get the scale down and how to lose fat as fast as possible. Go. Now take it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most advantageous aspects of having a coach in a building phase, when the goal really is muscle growth. And we have nutrition on lock, you're getting sufficiently fueled, and we can really dial in other vectors to accelerate your body composition progress. And I really do think from a programming perspective, it comes down to, yes, we need sufficient volume and intensity. Once we can get that for that person, that individual person's necessities and their actual tolerance, say volume, budget, and intensity threshold. So for instance, I'll give you a perfect example. If I know that certain clients can't push themselves to failure, no matter how many directives I give them, no matter how many video feedbacks I give them, I'm going to titrate up the training dose. Well, consider the fact that training dose is an amalgamation of things. Training dose means your training volume plus your training intensity, aka your proximity to failure. So if someone can't get sufficiently close to failure, I may increase that training dose by increasing volume. The same thing can be said when I have people that are just able to thrash themselves in the gym and take every single set to failure. I'm going to lower that volume from a sets perspective, because they already have a high training dose. But beyond volume and intensity, which is what we generally cover in the common fitness industry conversations, it really does, like, I always say attention to detail makes all the difference. And that's what I really try to get across with my programming for that specific person. I'm giving different cues for that specific individual. If they have like a scapular impingement, I may have, instead of everyone in the gym goes to a 90-degree, you were mentioning this with the shoulder press, a 90-degree, so flat back, and they're pressing outward. So it's in a supinated hand position. Well, for specific individuals with scapular impingement, I just had this conversation with the clientele. I have her going to one notch below 90. So it's at a high incline press, and I'm doing a high interior delt press with a neutral grip, because it's not putting her in a disadvantageous position from a scapular perspective, where it's actually exacerbating the niggles that she already has. So that's where differences in exercise selection and cueing, in feedback from your actual coach, make all the difference, where you're able to actually maximize muscle growth, not only in a short-term perspective, but from a long-term perspective. Because you know what's the worst for muscle growth in general? Being injured. So like, we have to really think about the longevity aspect of this. So I just wanted to round that up. But Ruby, we're gonna round this up, because I got another call in 2 minutes.
Just a quick one on what you just said. This is also where we need to. Too many times people are overcomplicating things. Yes, but it can't be oversimplified. Just wanting to bring back what I said before, it still can't be all that oversimplified. I got triggered by a reel as the other day. It's just like, it's really that simple. You just need to eat carbs before you train, protein after you train, and some blah, blah, blah. Like, is it really that simple? Carbs before you train, cool. What about carbs to replenish? What about carbs through the day? What about protein, like 3 to 5 times a day, eating at least 35 grams per meal? Like, it's really not that simple. And then everyone knows all the simple shit. That's why it's like, that's why it's difficult, because we need to now implement this. This is the hardest part of fat loss. The actual thing, yes, it's simple, but how are we going to implement that into a life that incorporates all that? But this is even more with the biomechanics of blah, 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 blah. Well, you don't yet know how to get that muscle engaged. You don't yet know how to brace. Research has even shown, with the shoulder press as the example, that you can get just as much delt growth, even in your side delts, with the bench at 80 degrees, because that is still putting the stimulus on your shoulders. And you're also going to get much sexier collarbones, because that's also getting a little bit of your upper pecs too. So why not get the best of both worlds? And add in lateral raises. Lateral raises, you should be doing them regardless anyway. Delt growth is what you want, because they're the main exercise for it. And I don't know whether you've ever got this, and I never just got it from clients. I've seen it even from men. Like, guys have said this. They're like, I hate lateral raises. I don't do them. I'm like, I bet your bottom dollar that you hate them because number one, you can't progress on them, and number two, you feel weak on them, and number three, they are the same shit day in and day out. And the only reason that I don't know whether you can tell the difference. Can you tell the difference that my delts have grown since we last spoken?
I don't think the lighting's good enough for me to see, Ruby. You might have to post an update on Instagram and we'll check them out.
Yeah, the reason I said that is because I pulled me up in the gym. Obviously, I'm kind of depleted now. It's morning. But when I have more carbs in me, more food in me, I get told that my delts have grown. And if you are okay with being really freaking bored, then you're going to make progress because I do lateral raises with the same weight. Well, I go between two different dumbbells. It's either 5 kilos or 6 kilos, aka 10 pounds or 12 pounds. If I'm doing I do them for under 12 reps. I don't really go over 10 or 12 reps at the moment. But if I wanted to do more reps, I would use the 8 pounds. I've been doing that at least 4 times a week. Sometimes I do a fifth one when I have to extend my program because I didn't get to fit it all in 4 days because sometimes life happens and that's okay. So there's something there too. Sometimes I have to extend 4 days into 5 days. This is where that whole perfectionism thing, as long as you're hitting the effective reps. Anyway, that aside, I will always have the lateral raises in the session that I'm doing. So it's either 4 times or 5 times. And because of doing the same boring shit day in, day out, I've gotten more stimulus to my delts. And because I don't do all that many actual shoulder presses. I only have one actual shoulder press. Everything else is more so like I have a medium incline chest press, and they're the only 2 pressing exercises I have. But it's repetition with the stimulus of the smaller muscle groups, which you can do because they're easier to recover from, that has allowed my delts to grow. And this is where you need to also distinguish between, you can't do that for glutes because your glutes are a bigger muscle. And if you're able to train your glutes and your legs every single day, then unless you're doing a full body program, you're not going to be able to do like legs, because that is volume overkill and you're not going to recover from that. And I would also argue that you can't do like hinge and exhaust yourself. If I do full body, like I do upper, lower, and then 2 full body or 3 full body. And or 3 full body. And with those full body ones, it's more like a squat, a hinge, a squat, or a hinge, a squat, a hinge. Like you need to have a coach to be able to split your volume up in a way that you can give your absolute best for that muscle to fatigue and not you fatigue before then. But my last note, because I want you to explain this as a bow and like a bow tie on this, because I think you can explain it better in the scientific terms. That's okay. But I really want people on this podcast to understand this because it can hold you back if you don't. You can have something like the leg press at the moment. We mentioned sometimes, I don't know whether it was you, I think it was Jeff. He mentioned that you can pull back the reps sometimes. Sometimes you'll have to pull back the weight. And I do that all the time on my leg press now. That he said with the actual exercises, and he said that leg press you can push. Well, sometimes I need to pull the weight all the way back. Sometimes I don't have the same in me. But why? Because I'm doing a leg press variation twice a week. Sometimes actually, I would say 3 times because I have one on my full body session where I'm doing staggered stance. So I'm doing a split stance kind of like, I'm doing that on my leg press with the other 2 being double legged. So because I have such exposure to that, we can even say this with pull-ups. If you have such an exposure to like pull downs or pull-ups, it's going to be harder for you to progress strength-wise because you're always targeting that same thing. And it's a volume thing versus when we remove the volume and the fatigue, then the strength has the expression to show. So we also this is where you need to know which exercises are the ones that will have that leeway for, okay, we want to see some stuff here. But there are others where it's okay to like fluctuate between it because it's a systemic volume approach for the program for the week. Explain that and then you can tie the bow on it.
Yeah, so I think what you're really trying to allude to is the fact that we have to have considerations in general about how the fatigue of a previous session and of exercises that stimulate the same muscle fibers will impact subsequent performances. So if you are utilizing, and that's where I really am more of an advocate for undulating periodization, meaning I will undulate rep ranges so that we're still able to aim for progressive overload from a performance perspective, but it's in different rep ranges. So some days we're going to utilize, say, 5 to 10 reps. Other other days for the same muscle groups, it's going to be 15 to 20 reps. Sometimes I'll have higher rep training of 25 to 30 reps. And so we're able to push different systems, both from an energy system perspective, but also from a loading parameter perspective. But oftentimes what we have to realize is that you have to consider what you did. I always try to get this across to individuals that I train, that I coach. You are not training just for today. You have to consider that today's training is impacting tomorrow and the rest of the weeks. So what you want to do is give your body and your muscle groups that you're training on a particular day a sufficient stimulus where you're pushing yourself adequately hard to stimulate that muscle growth, but not so hard that you're burning yourself that you cannot recover for your next session. So it really is almost like a tightrope walk that we are trying to hit in a balance and harmony that we're trying to strike so that you can continue progressing over time. And so really when it comes down to it, guys, what we've tried to get across on this podcast is that there are so many prerequisites to get to the actual lean, muscular, toned physique that you're looking for. And a lot of times we're missing the forest for the trees. So a lot of times fat loss is sexy and everyone thinks that the solution to their body composition issue or the thing that is going to be the lever that you need to pull to expedite your progress is just a fat loss phase. But as we've alluded to in the entire course of this hour plus podcast, you really need to realize that a foundation needs to be set and you cannot place your expectations for progress from a physique perspective based off what someone on Instagram is saying, because what a lot of you don't realize is that the people you look up to are fitness professionals or content creators. They are people that put in hard yards of actually building a physique, fueling themselves properly, pushing themselves hard in the gym, learning how to train for years prior to ever getting any exposure or posting selfies on the internet. So really when it comes down to it, you need to build a foundation. You need to spend enough time. And this isn't just a fat loss, phase type of timeline. You need to spend a sufficient period of time. I personally always advocate for spending 4 times as much time out of a deficit as you are in a deficit. So say that you were in a deficit for 2 months, it would be 8 months of lean building at maintenance or in a slight surplus, and really pushing your training and learning how to train both well from a technique and form perspective and execution perspective, but also sufficiently hard so that you're actually putting yourself in an advantageous position to build muscle, because that is what's going to build the foundation. But we're going to wrap this up here, guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in, and we'll be back in another roundtable probably in the next month or two. So peace.
Don't forget to rate all our podcasts 5 stars. You'll find the links to all of them down below. My Muscle Connection podcast, the Chasing Clarity podcast, and 100% Real with Ruby. You'll find our Instagram handles down there as well, at TransformXRuby, at Brandon DeCruz _ and at Jeff Hain. I don't think he changed his to anything else, did he? I think he did.
We will link it in the show notes below.
Yeah, we'll link it in the show notes below. Thanks for listening.